So thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, the new employment services model, which will look at what's new and what's changed. My name's Carly Hanson and I'm one of the Sector Sustainability Coordinators at Community Legal Centres Queensland. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're holding today's webinar. In Meanjin or Brisbane, they are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. I wish to pay my deep respect to their elders, past, present and future, and acknowledge that these are stolen lands and that sovereignty was never ceded. As today's webinar is being viewed by people throughout Queensland and across the country, I'd also really love to pay my respect to the traditional owners throughout Australia and extend a very warm welcome to any First Nations people who are joining us for today's session. So I will, in a moment, welcome and introduce you to Simone Casey, Senior Policy Advisor with ACOS, who will be presenting today's session. She'll be taking us through the new employment services model, which is called Workforce Australia. So in late May, Social Security income support recipients who are required to use employment services, I guess the former job active participants, will have received letters from the Department of Education, Skills and Employment containing information about the employment services model changes. It's anticipated that there might be some confusion as these changes are implemented. So Simone will talk us through this new system and explore some of the potential implementation pain points around that. So I'll hand over to Simone in a moment to tell you a little bit more about herself. But firstly, just some quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is being recorded and I'll have the recording available for you to download later this afternoon. PowerPoints in a PDF format have been emailed out to everyone who registered just before we started today's session, and you can also download them from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel if you need. We'll have a couple of points where we'll stop and just see if there's any questions, because it is a complex area. So do type your questions into the question box as you think of them so that we can address those. And then there'll also be time for some questions and a bit of discussion at the end. So if you've got a mic handy, you're welcome to participate by, speaking, and we can unmute you to do that. So I might now hand over to Simone to kick us off. Thank you very much, Simone, and I'll come back in when we do the questions.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Simone Casey. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at ACOS, and I'd also like to acknowledge the country that I'm joining from, which is the Voluntary country. I'm in Nam, and I pay respects to elders past and present. I'm going to turn my video off so we can focus on the content of the slides. And as has just been explained, we're going to stop at certain points to kind of respond to some questions during the presentation, but we'll also allow some time at the end of the presentation to come back and have a bit of discussion about some of those things if we have time. So just turn my camera off now. Yeah, understanding new employment services, Workforce Australia. So for a long time now, we've referred to the new employment services model as NESM, but just recently it's been rebranded as Workforce Australia. So today I'm going to just sort of give you a little bit of background on the history of employment services leading up to the current brand, Workforce Australia. I'm going to run through what's changing kind of in the model of service that people who are required to use employment services, what the changes are for them rather than from the provider's point of view. And I'm just going to give you the option to connect with me later to stay in touch with your experiences of the transition to new employment services or Workforce Australia. So employment services are government-funded services that have been provided by a privatised market since 1998. And in broad terms, employment services are intended to help provide assistance to people who are receiving employment benefits to get a job. More and more over the years, their role has been basically to monitor whether people are meeting their mutual obligation requirements And in the past, they received their income with a split of 40 to 60% in fees for administration and outcome fees. So to date in Australia, we've been through, well, we're just about to go through our fourth iteration of privatised employment services. So that started out with the Job Network in 1998. And we had Job Services Australia, and then we had Job Active, which expires on July 1st, and then we move into Workforce Australia. So I've been around in this sector since the Job Network sort of came in around the time it would transition from Job Network to Job Services Australia. And despite the name changes or the brand changes, I think a lot of people still talk about the Job Network, you know, that idea that it's the Job Network is kind of the brand that a lot of people still identify with. So, you know, we now need to get used to actually thinking about it being called Workforce Australia. So where did Workforce Australia come from? Well, it's kind of in the evolution of policy as a result of a government review that kind of began about 2018. It was a consultation on what employment services should look like in the future. And a lot of that consultation was based on knowledge that the previous versions of the employment services system hadn't been working very well from the perspective of people using those systems, from the perspective of people providing those services, and also from the point of view of employers. So Workforce Australia was, as I said, kind of went into a development stage between about sort of 2019 to the present time, where some trials were conducted in 2 locations around Australia, and where some digital elements of the new employment services model itself were trialled as well. So on the 1st of July, we have coming to life the evolution of those trials in terms of Workforce Australia. And these services are supposed to be better than the ones that came before. And this, you know, because of the review and the focus of the review, and intention is that they, you know, create better services for people who are looking for work, and, you know, also help employers as well. So as I said, this model has been in development for a number of years. So I'm just showing you a little bit of a timeline of the different stages of that process. So it was a consultation process. There's been input through sort of submissions to various stages of the review over that process. Over that period, there's also been some government evaluations being conducted in the trial areas and of the digital elements of the service. So we're currently in the stage on the very right-hand side of this slide, the April to July 22, where the new model is about to be unleashed, and where people have started to receive information about what's going to happen in terms of their employment service provider. There was a competitive procurement for the providers of Workforce Australia. So that was put out to tender in about October last year. And in about March this year, the providers of the new Workforce Australia services were introduced, were announced. And so there's been quite a big shake-up in the providers from the Job Active system to the Workforce Australia system. Through that competitive procurement, and I'll come back to kind of have a look at what that looks like in the ground of where the new Workforce Australia providers are operating, and whether they're the same providers who were in the Job Active system a little while. So what's going to happen from the 1st of July is people are being streamed either into Workforce Australia online or into Workforce Australia provider services. So in the design of Workforce Australia, it was intended that around 50% of people would either go into online services or into provider services. So online services are targeted at people who are not long-term unemployed, who might just basically be transitionally unemployed. And so they just engage with employment services online using the MyGov app or using their phone apps. And they have access to a digital contact centre that they can ring up and say, hey, I can't figure out how to use this bit of the online employment services. I can't work out how to do my job plan, or, oh, I got a payment suspension for not completing a requirement. So they have access to basically a government-run contact centre. And the face-to-face services called Workforce Australia Provider Services, they're for the people who have found it more difficult to get a job, and using the kind of streaming process that the Department of Employment have always used, that's called the Job Seeker Classification Instrument, that assesses basically how difficult it might be for people to get a job. And so for those people who have had more difficulty in the past or are likely to have difficulty in the future, they are streamed into the Workforce Australia Provider Services. So they will go to a provider, attend appointment face-to-face, and get support from the providers themselves through to access the various tools that are available to the providers to help people get ready for work. Things like doing training or doing getting a wage subsidy, and those kinds of things. So the Workforce Australia Provider Services are pretty much what we used to sort of consider to be job active face-to-face services, but targeted really at people who are more at risk of becoming long-term unemployed or who are already long-term unemployed, rather than the people who find it easier to get a job, who will just go into the online services. Now, although the intention was that it would be about a 50-50 split between people being online or people going into provider services, we have discovered over the last few days that there's been a change in policy decisions, so that basically everybody who's currently in a job active service will be transferred to Workforce Australia face-to-face services. So you can see on this slide here that the numbers of people who will be going into online versus face-to-face services is not a neat split of 50-50. And the people who are going into Workforce Australia online are people who've been in online employment services already. So with COVID, there was a large increase in people in the job active system. And in order to be able to manage that, the Department of Employment streamed them into online employment services. So there are already around 165,000 people in online employment services who'll go straight into Workforce Australia online. So that was a little bit of a change in the numbers that we expected to go into face-to-faces versus digital employment services. But over time, I believe that the balance is intended to be around a 50-50 split between people being in digital services versus online service, so face-to-face versus online services. So what's been happening recently, since about the 23rd of May, is people who are in job active already will have been receiving letters from the Department of Employment advising them that there is a change. So the drafts of those letters look, just basically saying your employment service is changing. It's going to be called Workforce Australia, and your new provider will be X provider, and that X provider will depend on whether that provider stayed as they were a job active provider and they remain being a Workforce Australia provider or not. And I'm just going to have a look at some of the shake-up of the provider market in a slide in a minute. But just importantly to note from this slide, communications from the Department of Employment, that letters have already gone out. There are links in those letters to information resources, so people can click on them to find out what's going on. There's a transition contact number on those letters that people can ring to kind of, if they're uncertain about what's going on, they can ring that up and get some help. I should have put the transition number on these slides here, but I will get it for people after this session. So I guess what I'm hearing out in the community and, you know, online on social media is people are getting these letters and they're going, you know, what's going on? Like, you know, why aren't I going to see this provider? What does Workforce Australia mean? You know, what is all of this? And you know, the feeling is that there's quite a bit of confusion at the moment about the changes. So I just wanted to have a little bit of a look at the change in the providers. So what's on this slide here, and I apologise, it's very busy and hard to read, but there are some links in the resources slide at the end of this slide pack that you can click on the links and have a closer look at it. But on this slide, basically, it lists all the employment regions in Australia. So Australia is divided up into employment regions where the employment service providers operate. So they're pretty big regions, actually. So if you look at some of the regions on this slide, say the top one, Adelaide North, the sort of teal colour is shows you that where number of providers who are the same are staying in that area. So in Adelaide North, there were 4 providers who are the same, but 2 providers no longer there. So that means that there were probably 6 providers in that area, and now there are only 4. And the reason why it's shrunk from 6 to 4 is because of that, you know, the split between people going into digital services versus face-to-face services. So in terms of capacity of numbers of people in those regions, to be kind of financially viable, they can't have that many providers anymore. So in most regions, there's been a reduction in the overall number of providers by 1 or 2, just reflecting the fact that now in the future 50% of people are expected to go into digital employment services. In some of the regions, there's been quite significant losses overall. So if you look in Brisbane South, East, which I'm pointing at now, you can see that 7 providers gone basically from that region. And then the pale blue is the number of new providers in that region. So they lost 7 in Brisbane South, and they've gained a couple more that are new providers starting up. This, so yeah, they've gained 5 new ones. So Brisbane South is one of the regions, Southeast, I think, is one of the regions where there's been a big shake-up. So it looks like none of the providers that were in that region have continued. Let's take another example. Let's see, I'll go Goulburn Murray. So we can see there that there are, I think, 2 continuing providers, 2 that have been lost, and 1 that's new one that's come in. So on this slide, you get an indication of kind of how much change there is across all the different employment regions. And this is important because when people were getting their letters saying there's been changes, it really depends on whether the providers have stayed in the region that they were in, whether they are continuing to see the same providers. So the rules that the Department of Employment apply to whether people were changing providers or not were, if they were already with the same provider, they would so if they're already with a job active provider that was continuing, they would stay with that provider in Workforce Australia. But if that job active provider was no longer operating in that area, they would be sent to a new provider. And there's also some specialist providers in some regions. So in some cases, people will be being referred to the specialist providers if there is a specialist provider in their region. And in the briefing that I've done for ACOS, that there's a link to in the final slide, you can click on that and kind of go in and have a look at specific regions and see who's there and see where the specialist providers are. So there's a big shake-up and a bit of confusion out there about what's happened in terms of, you know, whether people are continuing with their providers or not. I thought I'd just stop here and see if there's any questions so far about the communications to people who are in job active. and or any questions about the change in the providers themselves, or even any comments. So at this stage, we're just using the chat. So we could just have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions. And we'll give you a second to type anything in that you want to ask. I'm not good at using GoToWebinar, so I might need a little help having a look. Okay,
That's
I can see our
fine.
question.
So Simone, a couple of questions have come through and I'm happy to read those out for you.
Okay.
Deborah's just checking, so there are no DES providers anymore, is that correct?
Oh no, this change doesn't affect us at all. So if you're currently with a DES provider, this doesn't affect you at all. Some of the DES providers have actually won business in Workforce Australia. So some of the big DES providers will actually now kind of have Workforce Australia branding as well as DES branding, and that's possibly causing a bit of confusion out there as well. Anyone who's in DES shouldn't be affected by these changes at all.
So this is probably just going on a little bit of a tangent, but would you be able to explain what a DES provider is? Just a question from Rachel there.
Yeah, it's a disability employment service provider. So they're very similar to job active providers, but they work with people who've had been assessed as having a disability. And so they've been streamed into disability employment services rather than job active. And they have slightly different rules, and they have a different kind of market. You know, when I talked about there being procurements for the providers, as procurement happens separately to the job active one.
A couple of questions have also come through about whether people streamed to Workforce Australia provider services can seek to go digital. If so, how? And is there a different criteria for people transitioning from job active?
So the first part of the question, I haven't seen anything about people being able to opt out of face-to-face services. I understand that it's if you're assessed as needing face-to-face services that you go into them. I think I was at a webinar yesterday and they were talking about people maybe being able to opt out if, for example, they're already working a certain amount. So it's a really good question that we need to follow up and see, you know, what the opt-out rules will be from face-to-face services. And sorry, what was the second part of the question? Just wanted to clarify.
The second part was, is there different criteria for people transitioning from job active?
So I think, as I mentioned before, everybody who's in job active face-to-face services already will transfer into face-to-face services in Workforce Australia from the 1st of July. So it's only people who are already in online employment services who will go into digital employment services in the first instance. If I haven't answered that question properly, maybe we can come back to it at the end.
Great. There are also another couple of questions, if you're happy to address those now as well, Simone. So Catherine's wondering if there are any providers in Kalgoorlie. I think just looking at the list of providers on the screen, the current slide.
Oh, that's a good question. It's only red there, isn't there? Sorry, Catherine. I should have done some caveats around this, the chart that I created. I used data from, you know, compared different data sources, and so I cannot be 100% certain that I got it completely right. So yeah, I'll have a look at Kalgoorlie. Thank you. And maybe we can talk a little bit later about how people can stay in touch with me if they've got more questions as well, so we can follow up on those things.
Yeah, for sure. Shall we come back to the remaining questions at the end, do you think?
There's just one quickly I can see about will DES clients be involved in PBAS? Not yet. As far as I know, there's no intent to bring DES into the PBAS. There is a review process of DES going on at the moment, but at this stage there's been no sign that that's going to happen. I'm not going to say categorically that it won't happen, but as far as I know, it's not currently being discussed. Yeah, okay, well, I'll move on then.
Great.
Okay, so the new employment services model also has quite a new features, quite a few new features. And I'm going to run through each of the things that are on this slide in a bit of detail. So don't panic if I run through this outline, and I will come back to the detail of each of these items. So points-based activation instead of job search targets, we'll talk about that in some detail. Employability skills training, and an activity for people who are in digital employment services and in face-to-face services, which is called 6 monthly activity requirement instead of what we currently call that annual activity requirement. The idea is that they're going to be revamped work for the dole activities. So if we have time, I'll try and talk a little bit about that. And there's also an expansion of the National Work Experience Program. So bear with me while we talk about these things. We'll probably stop at the points-based activation section just for a little while to respond to any questions in the chat. So get ready if you have any, because we'll be able to spend a bit of time looking at those. Okay, so points-based activation is a concept that's supposed to be introducing a more flexible way that people can demonstrate that they've been looking for a job. So at the moment, most people will be familiar with the idea that we have job search targets, and the default job search target for most people has been about 20 job searches per month. It has varied by different categories of people. So job search targets will be replaced by points-based activation. And the idea will be that people will start out with a 100-point target, but the points target is supposed to be tailored to the individuals. So different people, you know, in different labour markets, and they have different personal circumstances. So the idea is that when you first set up your job plan and you speak to your provider about your new job plan, that they customise the job search target according to your situation. So if you're in a labour market where there's just not many jobs, they should apply a labour market credit. And if your personal circumstances mean that you're not available or you only have partial capacity to work, that your personal circumstances should reduce your points targets down. So on this slide, you can see the ways in which points credits can be applied so that points targets will be reduced. And the one most important thing that I would like people to take away from this session, if nothing else, is that knowing when you go in to set up your new job plan that you can get points credits applied is one of the most important things, you know, for you in terms of making sure that the points target is not onerous. So honestly, have a look at what the points credits are available and see if you can get them brought down. The points targets basically themselves consist of accumulation of a number of points for different kinds of activities. So you can get in each reporting month. So basically it's the same reporting month that you have for jobs, doing your job searches. You can say, well, this month I did, or I'm going to do 10 points of this, 20 points of that, 15 points of something else, and it's all going to add up to my points target. So on this slide, I just indicated what the points targets are, the points values are that the department has set for different kinds of activities. So a job application is 5 points, or updating your career profile on the Job Seeker app is 5 points. So on here you can see that there's a whole range of different points for different kinds of activities. There is some more information that the Department of Employment have published as well around this on the jobsearch.gov.au website. I think everybody is of the view that the points system seems very confusing at the outset in terms of, like, you know, well, I've got to figure out how I'm going to do 100 points of stuff, whereas in the past it was sort of pretty clear 20 job searches is 20 job searches. But I think the idea of these points is that things that you are doing kind of anyway that are part of looking for, applying for, getting ready for a job get counted instead of doing the job searches. So it's kind of like changing thinking in terms of, like, if I was already working, then I can put, you know, 80 points of my working time down in my reporting my points for that month, that kind of thing. So I think we all need to also think about identifying activities that we're already doing that can go towards the points rather than setting up new activities. But I'm not for a second kind of glossing over the fact that this is quite complicated, and it has caused quite a bit of, I guess, confusion and alarm so far in terms of people thinking about, you know, well, if I'm already doing volunteering, do I now have to do all these other things as well, and how am I going to get my points to add up? So most important things here, as I say, points credits, points credits, points credits, get points credits, as you know, to the extent that they're available, and then have a look at the activities that you're already doing and see how much they are going to be contribute to the points target for the month. Now, if all else fails, you can go back to doing the 20 job searches or the 12 job searches or the 8 job searches that were the kind of what you were used to doing as well. I'm not saying this doesn't have controversy, it does, so I'm expecting we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about this. Just wanted to kind of give you another visualization of points. So this slide here, it does come from the Department of Employment's own information on this system. It shows, you know, what different combinations of points, how they might add up to the totals. It also shows that you can have a points credit. So if in a reporting period you do more things, and you can track those things and you can put them into what they're calling a bank, and you can bank it towards the next reporting period. So I just wanted to check. Yeah, so my understanding is that instead of on the Job Seeker app at the moment, where you have the dial that shows the number of job searches that you've got to do and how many of them you've met, that you'll have a dial for the 100 points. I believe this is what it will look like. I'm not 100% sure because no one's ever shown me the interface for the app or for the MyGov website so far. But you'll be sort of like able to monitor how many points you've reported so far and how many more you've got to do. And my understanding is that the Department of Employment will send out SMSs at various stages throughout the reporting period. So at sort of 10 days before the points are due, there'll be a reminder that you have got points, you know, X number of points to do. And then, you know, so this is supposed to be a way of kind of reminding people that they haven't completed their points, or that there is limited time to do that. So this is all something that's going to take quite a lot of getting used to. It's important to note that the government are allowing for the first reporting period a grace period, so that people won't get payment suspensions if they haven't been able to figure out how to get the, you know, use the point system, report the points, and so on. So from the date that people start using points, which is the date that you get your job plan updated after your first appointment with your provider, you then have 30 days to, for the first reporting, to get used to it, and then you won't be penalised in those 30 days. And then after that, there'll be the usual targeted compliance framework, kind of payment suspensions and so on that will go with the points framework. None of that is without controversy either. So I'll pause here to basically respond to some of the questions and, just see if there's any detail around this point system that I can help clarify. And we can come back to having more robust discussion about this at the end. I can see little chat things flashing up. I don't really know how to check them, so I'm going to leave that with you, Carly, please.
That's okay, no problem. So I might just focus on the ones that deal with the points. So what are the methods to reduce the points target?
The methods, so first of all, if you're with a provider face-to-face, which most people who are already in Job Active will be going into in Workforce Australia, your first appointment with your provider, where you sit down and look at your job plan, is the time to say, I think I'm eligible for this credit or that credit. So it's very important at that point in time to get your points changed. And then if at any point during the month, the reporting month, you're like, hey, I've just, had some personal crisis or I haven't been well, then you'll be able to ring up your provider and say, I'm not going to be able to meet my points. I've got a valid reason. They need to go down, or you need to give me an exemption for this month. So that's sort of a similar process that applies to in Job Active at the moment with job searches. If in theory, if you can't complete them, you can contact your provider and go, hey, look, I can't get this done this month because, something's happened. So yeah, two, important mechanisms there, getting them reduced when you first sit down with the provider, and then also through the reporting month itself, if you're like, hang on, I can't do this, to contact your provider. Now, the same thing applies if you're in digital employment services or online employment services. It's the same thing. You ring up the contact centre and go, right, I'm in this situation, so I think my points target needs to be reduced. And so people getting on the phone to the digital contact centre is an important part, I think, of the online employment services. So hopefully I've answered that question.
Great, thank you. There are quite a lot of questions here. So what evidence is required regarding the points?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I've been reading through all the literature and advice the department have put out, and I think it varies quite a lot. So I've seen things like if you're enrolled in a course, you can upload your confirmation of enrolment, and then, that would be, depending on the number of hours of the course, that would be either 40 or 80% of your points for that month that you can prove that you're doing by having uploaded your confirmation of enrolment. And then at the end of the month, you might then say, yep, I've been doing my study tick, whatever, and that's it, right? You don't have to say, okay, yes, on Monday I attended 5 hours of online tutorials, or, you don't have to account for actually attendance at that course. So that's my understanding in terms of training courses. But for things like Work for the Dole, for example, which is, controversial in itself, but I understand they have a system of scanning QR codes every day to show that you've attended the activity. So I believe that arrangement would still apply. Say applying for a job or, speaking to an employer, I understand things like a screenshot of an email or something like that. These would be proofs that you've done something that you can upload. But as I say, I'm still not 100% sure exactly the detail of what evidence will have to be provided for the points thing. And this is one of the concerns I understand that people have around reporting points, is how onerous is it going to be to prove that you've, done the things that you've said you've done. Very, very interesting question.
So another one here is, will hours spent working with a financial counsellor add to the points?
Well, one of the categories on the table that I showed you of the points, there was one for sort of related counsellings. So I would expect that you could have points credits for that under that category. But, like all of these questions are really good in terms of, has the detail of this really been thought out? and all those categories allowable, in terms of what's going to be, what the providers are going to kind of say, oh yeah, 10 points for going to your financial counsellor or not. So, good question. I'll make a note of that. I do see that we're running out of time a bit, but I think if we could spend maybe a couple more minutes on these questions, and I'll go back to some of the other content that I wanted to get through.
Great. So you mentioned counselling providing 10 points. So does a counselling service need to be registered with Workforce Australia Services in order to get those points?
I don't believe so. So I've gone back to the points table here because, to be honest, I haven't memorised all of the points values. So I guess 10. So I don't think so. I think it's an honour system. Like you say, you're going to your counselling, whatever type it is, that you can just say, yeah, I've got 10 points of that, and don't have to be registered as like the preferred provider or the only provider of those services.
Great.
Any more quickies and then we can move on?
Yeah, so I'm just sort of looking through the list. I'll see if there's a couple of sort of quick or interesting ones. Someone said, I'm assuming having young children would be a personal circumstances points reducer. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so. So you're in social security law, if you're a principal carer parent, you should only have partial requirements, and so that would apply to the points system as well. So it's important that you do make sure that that credit is applied to your situation if that is your situation.
And I might make this one the last one just for now, and we'll try and come back to the rest at the end. But would exemptions apply for voluntary work?
Yes, so I've had this question a few different forums now. It depends. So people of different ages have, in social security law, the ability to meet their mutual obligation by undertaking voluntary work depending on their age. And so my understanding is that the law as it stands should still apply to this system. So if you're, look, I can't remember the exact rules, but if you're 60 plus, for example, I think 10 hours a week of, or a fortnight of volunteering is supposed to make you completely meeting your mutual obligations. So that would mean that you would be exempted from the points system rather than having to report that as your points. So this is what I understand from information I've had from the Department of Employment on that. But I suspect that there's going to be a heck of a lot of confusion from day one about what's going into points, people's points in their job plans, and whether existing activities like volunteering will result in an exemption because that's the social security law, or whether it would go down in your points plan as an activity that you're attending as part of the overall points target. I've got this volunteering question on my list of things I'm following up with the Department of Employment, and I did publish an FAQ on the points system on the ACOS website recently, and it was one of the questions I couldn't answer at that time, which I do intend to update on that FAQ when I get more information. And when I've updated those FAQs, I'll be sending them out through all the usual channels so we can get the information out to people. Yeah, all right, well, let's move on because maybe we can come back to, so I do not know answers to every question on points-based activation. I'm so sorry. Okay. So the other thing that's really important in the new model is this difference between the activity requirements that were in Job Active. So in Job Active, we had an annual activity requirement. It was also called the work for the dole phase. It went for 6 months, and in that phase, you were required to do an activity where work for the dole was a default if you weren't doing some other kind of activity. And depending on your age, you would have to do that activity for 25 hours or 15 hours a week for 6 months. So in Workforce Australia, there will no longer be an annual activity requirement. There'll be a new 6 monthly activity requirement. So we're going from an R to a SMAR, and the 6 monthly activity requirement is for 2 months instead of 6 months. So it's a shorter activity period, and the activities that will be available for people to do in that 2-month period are pretty much the same as the activities that were available in Job Active during the AAR or the Work for the Dole stage. But there's a little bit of variation in this new model because they're putting a focus on people doing employability skills training. So I think what we'll see in the first year of Workforce Australia is for this 6 monthly activity period, we'll see quite a lot of people being given the option, if you can call it that, of doing employability skills. But once they've done employability skills training, then I think Work for the Dole will become the default activity, and Work for the Dole will be for 2 months, as I said. So there, if you're in digital employment services, there's a mandatory activity at 4 months, and the default activity for, at that stage is employability skills training. So people who are using the online employment services will do a kind of face-to-face training thing after 4 months, and that will be employability skills. So on this slide, I basically just listed the activities that are available to people to do when they're in the SMAR 6 monthly activity stage. There is a big range of them, but what we've tended to find in the past that Work for the Dole has basically become the default activity because some of these other services that are available are just not available or appropriate to individual people. But the activities that people can be doing before they get to the 6 month activity are training and study, and I'd strongly emphasise trying to get the training and study set up before you get to the 6 monthly activity period. Other activities include, like if you're already doing paid work, you shouldn't be made to do Work for the Dole or a 6 monthly activity of any other type. Well, that was it. There were a couple of other things I wanted to focus on in the new model, which was the Work for the Dole changes. So as I've mentioned, the idea was that Work for the Dole would be for 2 months instead of 6 months, and they are revamping it in the sense that they are requiring the host providers of those Work for the Dole activities to provide people with some kind of, they're calling it micro-credentials, but it would basically be sort of something that shows, that you've participated and benefited from being in the Work for the Dole activity, and that you've received some kind of training or familiarisation with some kind of skill set, from having participated in that activity. So there's now a kind of shift, I suppose, in expecting that if you do end up doing Work for the Dole, that you've got something beneficial to show out of it. Now, I do not know exactly what that's going to look like, the extent to which it will be kind of genuinely something that will, benefit people. But I just wanted to flag that there is a shift in kind of intent around Work for the Dole, so that it's not just, sorting through clothes in an op shop, that there should be some kind of benefit provided from that activity. The other thing I just wanted to focus on a little bit is the National Work Experience Program. So this is being revamped as well. And what that is it's a work experience program that provides placements in the actual, job for 2 months of work experience. And if you do that work experience program, you would receive the supplement that's currently available to people who do the PATH internships. And so it's a $200 a fortnight supplement if you do the work experience program. And the reason why I say it's revamped in this new employment services model or Workforce Australia is that there are incentives now for providers to get you into that work experience. they get a payment for it, and so does the employer. So I feel like this is going to be a bit of a shift in the new model, where providers will be trying to get people into more work experience activities. So they're the kind of, I guess, some of the biggest changes that we're likely to see in the new employment services system, which I need to start calling Workforce Australia. I'm trying to break some habits here, calling it new employment services, but it's the same thing. So let's back to any kind of questions.
Okay, so I might go, I'm just going to randomly pick them, I think, so because there's quite a lot. Simone's might need to take some of these on notice and return to them later if we run out of time this afternoon. Are the employability skills training still only available for those between the ages of 17 and 24, or will those over the age of 25 be transferred to an employment services provider, which they weren't under the old contract, which was only by self-referral, those online services?
Yeah, that's correct. In the old model, EST, employability skills training, was only for people under 25. So in new model in Workforce Australia, employability skills training is being expanded to everybody, so 25 plus included. And my understanding is that there's supposed to be different training activities, training courses for people depending on their age, so that kind of young people who were doing the youth EST will stay in the youth EST, and people who are a bit older will do EST that's customised a little more to people who are older. But it's definitely being expanded. And for people who are in digital or online employment services, they will be kind of transferred to an EST course after 4 months. So it won't matter what age, there'll be a mechanism for transferring them into the employability skills training. So let me just explain employability skills a little bit more. So it comes in training blocks. So one block of training is basic kind of, job searching and, sort of getting your resume ready, like basic job search training. Just as the first block, and I think that's 4 weeks of training, but don't quote me because I might have my length of courses wrong. And then the second block is supposed to be more like industry immersion, which means, okay, so, if you want to work in retail, here's some training on skills that you might need if you're in retail. And so the training, trainings that are available depending on what kind of industry focus they have will vary across the different employment regions. And my understanding is there's supposed to be a bit of choice available to people. So if you say like, I'd prefer to work in hospo than in retail, there should be a choice, but I don't think there would be, great level of choice in terms of if you wanted to do something more complicated, like if you wanted to work in care work, for example, it wouldn't be that the EST is not focused on vocational training. It's more about kind of really just sort of getting used to working in the different industries. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. So this other one from Alessandro. In the past, only nationally recognised training counted and basic skills building groups and activities didn't. So will settlement services for new migrants and refugees now count as suitable self-help activities? For example, learn how to use a computer, English conversation clubs, etc.
Yeah, that's another really interesting question, and one I'll probably need to investigate a little bit more, because I think it makes total sense, and this whole new points-based thing is supposed to be about more flexibility, and I think it's a really good time to flag with the Department of Employment that there are other kinds of kind of community organised activities that are beneficial to people. So let me take that one on notice, because I don't know within the formal system as it's currently designed, whether that's accommodated or not. I mean, just going back to the task list, self-help and support groups is an activity in the points targets. Things like the skills, the skills for education employment program, which is the AMEP, they're all activities that can be done as part of the points system too. But I think what you're asking about is something a little less formal. So I'll follow up.
Thank you. I can flip all these questions over to you following the presentation if that's of interest as well.
That'd be great. Now, there's I feel like there's probably a few people who want to actually comment and get taken off mute. So we've got a few hands that are up. So maybe we could try that, and then I can respond to the rest of the questions when you've sent them to me, Carly, and see what's missing.
Sure. So it looks like Dawn Bainbridge, your hand is up and you've asked a couple of questions in the chat. So if I unmute you, would you like to ask your question with your microphone? So you're unmuted now.
I'm unmuted?
Yes. Hi, Dawn.
Sorry, look, am I unmuted? Yep. Sorry, I may have missed the response to this question. I'm just wondering how someone in residential rehabilitation for alcohol and other drug issues, is that considered personal circumstances?
Yeah, I understand that's the case. So if it's residential.
Yeah, and so that's the calculation for residential rehabilitation is 10 points. And so over what period of time?
Yeah, so I think residential treatment would be a full exemption from points. So personal circumstances should get reduced down to 0. And the one that's on here that's points is for drug and alcohol rehab, like if you're doing, a weekly counselling session or something like that. Yeah, which is a bit different to being in a residential environment. But it's another really good question, because it's something that we're a bit concerned about, how this point system might interact with treatments, health treatments like that. So I will make a note to double check that the information I'm providing is correct on that.
So someone in residential rehabilitation would likely be participating in counselling, self-help and support groups as well as non-vocational intervention. So there's a few things wrapped up in that. And so if they're exempt, that's great. So that's not really a change from what is as it is now.
Yeah, it should be right. Look, I mean, I have heard people who are in treatment, resi treatment, whatever, saying, oh, I've got my payment cut off because I didn't do the job search, right? It shouldn't be happening. It should be an exemption. I think it's something we need to make sure that it continues to be an exemption. There's not a confusion here between the categories. Yeah.
We still have to report to the job service providers, whoever our residents are registered with. And sometimes, that falls through the cracks a little bit if we're not getting the notifications in time. So that sometimes happens. But if it's an automatic exemption, then maybe there needs to be some clarification around that. So if it's for a period, because it varies between the job service providers about the length of time of exemption and contact. So it may be, if there's a specified period for 3 months or 6 months where they're completely exempted, and then some contact happens after that.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy that the workers in the centres have to kind of, maintain liaison with the job actives. Well, I think that's right. Exemptions should just apply and they should be consistent. You're right. I'm going to follow that one up. Thanks, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone, I know we're kind of at time, so Carly, I'm happy to stick around and ask, continue responding to questions, but it just depends how much time you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely keep going. I understand there might be some people that may need to leave, but we'll continue to record this. So if you do have to go, you can always pop back in and just listen to the end of the recording if you miss it. So there have been a couple of questions that have come through about how the points are calculated and what sort of time basis they are sort of calculated on. So I might try and wrap those up into one. So someone has asked, is it 100 points per week or is it 100 points per month? And someone else has asked, is it 10 points per hour or some other kind of scale? What sort of calculation would you use?
Yeah, so it's 100 points per month. And sorry if I wasn't clear about that. So the month is the reporting period. So in Job Active currently, everyone has a reporting period, which is basically the date, like the start of the kind of period that you've went into the Job Active system. So your reporting period in Workforce Australia will be the date from which you first get your new job plan. So that's 30 days. So it's 100 points over a month. And the other question on, was it hours, I think? Like how many points for how many hours?
Is it 10 points per hour or some other kind of calculation, or sort of 10 points per activity?
It just really depends on what the thing is. So on this slide, I'm just looking for the one that's full job, like working. So my understanding, like if it's not on this slide, it'll be in the links that are in the slide pack. But 5 hours of work is worth 5 points. So if it's employment, then it's a point for each hour of work. Yeah. So I was just looking at the education and training. Yes. 20 points per week full time, so that adds up to 80 points over the month. So it's not actually the hours of study that you do or the hours of contact that you have in your course. It's just a sort of blanket number for being enrolled in a full-time course. Yeah.
Thank you. This is an interesting one. So Hannah's wondering whether attending to a community lawyer to resolve a legal matter would be considered self-help and support group work.
Well, I'll say yes. I'll say yes to everything. I would also potentially put it under counselling category as well. But I think my understanding is that there's supposed to be a higher level of recognition of the kind of wide variety of things that people might be doing that are kind of helping their personal circumstances, and that things like that should be included. Yeah, and what I imagine it's going to come down to when people are talking to their providers about this is the provider's interpretation of what the categories of things are, and they'll have guidelines, you know, about, you know, what you can and you can't include. So this one about getting community legal centre advice is one of the ones I'll make a note of as well and make sure it's included in the guidelines. Yeah.
Comment from Daniel, just to follow that one up, has said, I'm a community lawyer. The answer to that question is no. So that's unfortunate.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it has been in the past, but this model, if it's going to be implemented as it was intended, should allow for that. So I'll follow up.
Great. Carolyn said, sort of a comment and a bit of a question. So the new reporting period starts from when the new job plan is agreed. How or when will this happen when there are nearly 600,000 job active clients being transferred to new providers and little or no upfront arrangements seem to have been made, with emails only going out to clients from the 23rd of May?
Yeah, so providers will make appointments with their people who are already in job active. So people should start being notified about appointments. I think it's from about the 20th of June. And obviously they can't see everybody all on the same day. So they're going to kind of stagger the appointments over the first 2 months. So at some point you'll get an SMS from your provider, new provider or old, but they'll be called Workforce Australia, saying your initial appointment with us is on X date at X time. And so that will be the point at which you will to be talking to them about your new job plan and talking to them about your new, the points target that, that's appropriate for you. So, yeah, so it will, something not to worry about until you've actually had your initial appointment. But go into that initial appointment prepared, as I say, prepared with the knowledge of the points credits and so on.
Yeah. I was wondering whether medical conditions count as a personal circumstance and whether it's possible to get a full exemption due to medical reasons. Just thinking about the people that might be on job seeker that are yet to be approved for DSP or who have had DSP rejected but don't have capacity to work.
Yeah, so people with partial capacity to work in job active, the category of people who haven't been or who are in the program of support or haven't had their DSP application approved, they should apply for personal circumstance credits. So, if it's an ongoing condition, you should be eligible for points credits. If you have like a kind of, chronic illness flare up, and you're incapacitated, outside of your kind of, regular situation, then you should actually go for a medical exemption. And those are available, with the medical certificates, depending on, what kind of, condition it is, either through Services Australia or through your provider. I think providers are able to give medical exemptions for up to 12 weeks, but I need to check on that.
Yeah. So what will happen in that first few months then when job active is turned off, but before the new provider has had a chance to set up the new job plan and points accountability?
Yeah, I'd like to say no news is good news in terms of if you haven't been notified about an appointment, you're just in the queue while they're getting, through all the people that they need to make appointments with. The job active providers who are not continuing will just kind of leave, but you may still find that on the job seeker dashboard or the app, the phone, how you currently have your job search requirements, that they'll stay switched on until you get transferred over into the Workforce Australia. So it's important just to keep an eye on what's going on your dashboard to make sure that you don't kind of assume that you don't still have requirements while you're waiting to be transferred to a Workforce Australia provider.
Belinda's wondering if you could please provide the information phone number for participants to call for more information if you have that available somewhere.
Yeah, I've got a pen. Someone can type it in the chat as well. So it's called the transition line, and it's 1300 854 414.
Okay, great. I've just popped that into the chat. Oh, no, maybe I've just sent it to organisers. Hang on a minute.
Yep. And on the slide pack, which you kind of sent around at the beginning, there's some links. I don't know if they'll work from the PDF. If you're looking for more information, you can't figure out who to contact. If you go onto the jobsearch.gov.au website, there's a section there on the transition arrangements, transition to Workforce Australia information, which the link is here on this slide, but that's got all the numbers and everything that you should call if you're not sure what's going on.
This is a good question as well. So what records will the Digital Service Centre staff keep regarding calls from confused people seeking clarification of the PBAS, especially regarding points credits? These records will be crucial for appeals.
Well, great question. I think it's important that they are basically noting everything, every call, so that they can identify where there are any kind of system issues right at the beginning. So I imagine there will be systems for them to do that. I believe every time you ring up the Digital Contact Centre that, when they kind of interact with you, there'll be IDing you, checking who they're talking to. So they'll probably be asking for your customer reference number, and then they'll make case notes, I think, on their systems, as they currently do when you call up the National Customer Service line. And so those records would then become, FOIable or for any kind of cases that arise, in the same way as I think they are, become available in any administrative appeals cases. Yeah. So I don't think it will just disappear into a void. I believe there'll be records kept.
Great. So we might maybe take just one or two more questions and then wrap up, and my apologies if we haven't got to your question. So I might go to this one, which is, will job seekers be able to add things like job interviews to their points tally themselves, or will it be needed to be added to their job plan and then approved by their Workforce Australia provider?
So reporting job interviews, I believe it's just taking a screenshot, say, like of a text message, like, I'm going to be at wherever, see you then. And, that's the only kind of proof. I'm not even sure if it will go that far, because there's confidentiality issues there too. So it might just be like on the online system, you just go in and say, had a job interview with X, organisation, and this was the name of the person that I met, and that's it. So I think that's the kind of, it won't have to be verified by anybody else that you've done that.
And just maybe a final comment here. So many of you may be feeling similarly that it's a bit disgraceful that such a confusing, half-baked, poorly considered and yet vital system that will affect a fundamentally vulnerable cohort has been implemented with little or no forward notice.
Yeah, good comment. I just think there's kind of there's a disconnect, I think, between the planning for these changes, that there's a belief that people will just sort of, they'll get the information when they need to get it. I think everybody who uses employment services and who is on job seeker payments, it has been experiencing a lot of stress, and that people, they want to know what's changing, how it's changing, and how it's going to affect them. So I completely agree that there's been quite a lot more forward information about these systems provided earlier, and that, it is an obligation of our governments to make sure that changes like these are well communicated to people before they happen. So, yeah.
And Linda from EGA has also noted that it is really important for publicly accessible guidelines regarding what's acceptable around, attending counselling and other things, so that people aren't suspended or penalised, and that there needs to be predictability and transparency to avoid penalties, and to inform appeals if something goes wrong and a person is suspended or cancelled or penalised.
Yeah, absolutely right. So I think the guidelines, all of these kind of things, you've all given me heaps of homework to go and do and scrub up even more on the changes, so that I can make sure that all the important issues that you've raised here are being properly considered once we get to sort of implementation dates and following that, and that there are mechanisms for there being feedback on, the effectiveness of the system, and that those feedback mechanisms actually lead to changes, quickly, because that's what we need. If something's not working, we need it to be fixed.
Well, thank you so much. We will wrap up the session there, but thank you for sticking around, Simone, and for answering all of those really detailed questions, and for everyone in the audience for asking such great questions. Hopefully that's helped to flesh some of these issues out a little further. So on behalf of the audience today, thank you so much to Simone and also to Economic Justice Australia who have partnered with us on this webinar. I hope you found the PowerPoints in the session really useful. I'm sure you did. And we will circulate the recording for this session this afternoon once it's ready to go. Before I do close down the session, just a reminder that there'll be a quick feedback survey as well. So please do complete that when it comes up. That really helps our presenters and also CLCQ to make sure that our sessions are relevant and helpful to you all. But for now, I'll say goodbye and thank you so much, everyone, again, and thank you especially to Simone Casey from ACOS, our presenter today. Hope you all have a fantastic afternoon and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Bye, everyone.